This is the Pennyworth podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Pennyworth Season 2, Episode 4, the mid-season finale, The Hunted Fox.
Mr. Ripper's villains would win us many battles, but they would not win the war. If vile atrocities and brutish sadism won wars, we'd all be speaking German. Must we defeat monsters by becoming monsters ourselves? No. Love, compassion, the liberal virtues are our greatest weapons, not because they are virtues, but because they will win out in the end. If we were all to die tomorrow, what I say would still hold true. In the fullness of time, other good people will rise to take up our banners and fight on. And we shall win out in the end because humanity is with us.
Welcome back, fellow governors, to the Pennyworth podcast for Pennyworth Season 2, Episode 4 on TV Podcast Industries. This is the mid-season finale of Pennyworth, The Hunted Fox. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow governors. I'm one of your other hosts, John.
As we mentioned in our last episode, even though Episode 3 and 4 were broadcast as a mid-season finale on one night, we've decided to podcast about each of the episodes separately to kind of give them their due. There was a lot that happened in Episode 3, and a lot that happened in Episode 4, so doing a podcast about both of them in one might have made a really long podcast, or we might have missed certain things we really wanted to talk about. One other reason for that is because I wanted to get one of the bits for the episode. What we do on our podcast, as you know, as we're from Ireland, have a lot of knowledge about UK stuff. I wanted to get one piece out of the episode, which was the speech from Mr. Penhaligon, the Cornish candidate. I couldn't get it when we were watching it originally because, well, I thought it was just his accent that was confusing me, but actually he's speaking in Cornish. This is what it sounds like.
In conclusion, as we say west of the Tamar, learn a silly, you scath burgessi.
So I thought I was going to easily be able to translate that. I thought I'd get the subtitles, and actually it would be in English, but it turns out that the speech is in Cornish. I shouldn't have waited, John. Do you know why?
Go on, let us know.
Because the translation of the Cornish that he speaks in that scene is actually an old Monty Python joke.
Excellent.
It's about somebody using a Hungarian to English translation book and saying the phrase, "My hovercraft is full of eels." So they translated that into Cornish, and that's what he says in front of the crowd. No wonder they have the reaction they do, which is complete silence after he says it. But it's just to illustrate that the character is from Cornwall, and that a lot of the people in the group are all in London, so they wouldn't understand his Cornish accent. But it is just a joke, and I waited for 2 days to get a copy of the episode with subtitles to get that. So we're sorry for the slight delay in our podcast, but it was a good joke. Well done, writer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good job.
Including Monty Python is always a good sign, and always good to think back to old Monty Python. There's a bit of that weird craziness in Pennyworth, to be honest.
There is a bit,
so it feels right, to be honest.
Yeah, unfortunately, 4 episodes in, we haven't seen any more grannies in carrying guns for the season.
I think it's an opportunity missed by them, to be honest.
I think so. But you never know. Maybe when we come back with the second half of the season. Later in 2021, we heard that it's coming back in March of 2021. The season will return then. So hopefully they'll have recruited some more grannies with guns for the show. Defending London, I think.
Well, they'll need to if the Raven Union's plans or anything to go by. They seem to be ramping up to attack, most likely with Stormcloud. Yeah, Captain Salt's Stormcloud project.
Yeah, let's jump into this discussion about episode 4 then, John. I know we've already talked about episode 3. I know our listeners have watched both episodes, so I'm sure we can dive straight into it. As we will be finishing up our Pennyworth podcast here after this episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast over at tvpodcastindustries.com so you can get the other stuff that we'll be covering between now and when the show returns in March. I know we're definitely going to be covering WandaVision, which comes out in January, on January 15th on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think the next show that's coming out is Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which comes out on March 19th. So we could be doing Pennyworth and Falcon and the Winter Soldier at the same time.
Yeah.
Depending on when this show returns in March. We don't know the exact date yet, but I'm expecting it's going to be early March when it returns. And if you want to send in any thoughts on the first part of Pennyworth, if you're just catching up on it, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with any thoughts that you have, and we'll discuss them when we return with the Pennyworth podcast.
Yeah, I think let's get on with our spoiler-filled review. Derek, what are some of the episode details?
Well, the episode was written by Seth Sinclair. He's an executive story editor for the show and wrote season 1, episode 7, Julie Christie. You remember that episode because it was the one that featured Crowley and Patricia's relationship, let's say. That really trippy episode. And I'm sure you noticed there was a lot of references to Mr. Crowley and the worshipping of the devil from as a previous partner of Patricia. He's obviously going to be better, they say about Jack. He's obviously going to be better than someone that worships the devil. So, maybe that was played in there by Seth as he was the writer of that episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly Patricia's new boyfriend is maybe a step up from Crowley, but not an awful lot. Certainly Martha decides to put him in his place. Certainly. Tied up. Hog-tied, if you will.
Good old Martha. Good old Martha. The episode was directed by Rob Bailey. We talked about Rob Bailey because he directed episode 3, the episode just before this, where we talked about his experience with Gotham and with Bruno Heller and Danny Cannon. So great to see him back for this finale episode of this half of the season. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. As the death of Bazza still resonates, Alfie struggles with his choices that ultimately led to the death of his friend. At Baz's funeral, Alfie decides to team up with Gully to get the money to pursue his American dream. An attack on the Lord Mayor by Alfie, Dave Boy and Gully and his team to steal gold bars sees tension rise between Gully and Alfie. At Delaney's, Dave Boy turns on one of Gully's men, Banjo, and friendships are on a knife edge between Gully and Alfie. But as they settle their differences, Gully's wife, Mrs. Troy, and Alfie share a moment down at the bar. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, after being shot at by Union forces, Bet Sykes and Katie make it to League-controlled London. But after a couple of days on the streets, she finally tracks down her sister, Peggy, at her new sex aid establishment, Sykes Payne. Elsewhere, the English League holds hustings for a new leader, and at Raven Union headquarters, the High Command of Francis Gaunt and Lord Harwood looks delicate as Captain Salt weaves his spidery web to sow dissent and ensure the deployment of his Project Stormcloud. As Lord Harwood becomes increasingly impatient at the lack of military success to reclaim London, Salt demonstrates the potential of his chemical weapon to claim total victory, as the spy by the name of Dr. Lucius Fox watches on.
Ooh, Dr. Lucius Fox.
Yes,
yeah.
Well, that was great, getting Lucius Fox. I was wondering, who is this guy that they've just followed into the toilet cubicle and sort of wiring up the heel of his shoe with his security pass, with everything else, and that was great. That
all
was a
the
great
gadgets,
little
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, all the gadgets, a miniature camera so he can film everything through a security pass, a tape recorder in his shoe. It's very cool. Lucius Fox, obviously well known from the movie universe and from the comic books and from Gotham, played by Chris Chalk over in Gotham, but he's the one that tends to supply the gadgets to Batman, so kind of interesting to see him in Pennyworth, especially because in Gotham they had their first meeting on that show. Alfred and Lucius Fox met for the first time in that show. So I wonder, I know these shows aren't connected, Gotham and Pennyworth aren't connected, they are written by the same writers, but I wonder, will they keep Alfred and
keep that
Lucius
separation.
Apart, it'd be interesting to see where he comes in. But let's get into our way of discussing these episodes. We usually talk about them in terms of Alfie and the boys in one section, because Alfie is the main character on the show, obviously. Then we talk about the Raven Union segments of the show and the English League, and then we kind of talk about anything that didn't fit particularly in with those main topics that we choose at the beginning of a season. So they don't always pan out as the show goes on. But this time, this is going directly on from episode 3. We're going to kick off with Alfie and the boys.
We're one boy down with Baz's death. Yeah. And I mean, it was nice that it kept on that tack, to be honest, right before the opening credits with Alfie's dream. And this was really nice shot with the shadows and the black and white with Alfie talking to Dave Boy. I thought it was kind of interesting that ultimately it gets turned on Alfie as opposed to Dave Boy, who basically let slip to Victor, the thief who stole Alfie's money. But it was Dave Boy that let slip, but it comes back down on Alfie, and Dave Boy blames Alfie, and it's more to do with all you can think of is money, 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 and effectively that Alfie is becoming obsessed with America, 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 and it is this it's this total sort of blinkered view of what he's wanting to do that effectively Dave Boy says meant that, we went in without reconning where Victor's was at the fairground, and that led to Baz's death. Mm-hmm. I think there's a great little line that comes in, at Baz's funeral, where Alfie is speaking with Gully, and he says, 10 years jungle combat, but we got taken out by a greedy cocktail waitress. It was my fault. We went in too soon, rushed with no plan.
Yeah.
And ultimately that is what Dave Boy is coming here. And I think, I kind of really enjoyed a bit of that shade being thrown onto Alfie, and the idea that actually his American dream is an American obsession, and all about getting the money. I'm still a little just on the money aspect. He owns and runs a club.
Yeah.
I suspect he would be making good money given by the people frequenting his establishment.
Yeah.
It seems, I get it's probably top up money, but my feeling is that as long as the place is making profit, then he should be rolling in the cash. It does look like that, the swinging 20s and 30s there, cocktail club land. It has both Raven and League. It's kind of a no man's land. It's kind of an armistice place. So,
well, yeah,
he's certainly got a bigger market. So,
but he's just lost 20 grand. Remember, a lot of money. And
yeah, well, that
was all off the books money, so nobody could trace it. So that's part of the thing. They're trying to escape without telling anybody that they're going. So if somebody's looking at their books and seeing this amount of money disappearing into Alfie's bank account directly, they'll probably know that he's doing something with it. Whereas this is all stuff that Alfie's keeping in a safe. This did go very differently than we were talking about in episode 3. I kind of thought that the death of Baza was going to give Dave Boy a storyline in this episode. We're going to give Dave Boy that moment where he realizes the things that he's done in the past is what led to Baz's death. I know the opening is a dream, and this is Alfie blaming himself again.
Yeah, exactly.
For what he's done. This is the kind of personality that Alfie has. He takes everything on board to himself and apportions the blame to himself. But I would like to see a little bit of reaction from Dave Boy, other than mourning a lost comrade. Because I don't feel like we've had much of that for Dave Boy. Like that, this seems like a perfectly built storyline to expand your cast and expand the experiences of the other members of your ensemble cast. I suppose the big difference with this show being that it's called Pennyworth, not Gotham or London 1960 DC or something. It's called Pennyworth, so everything has to kind of focus around that main character. Yeah. I just thought last episode I was kind of going, this is a big character death and should impact more than just Alfie.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, Alfie's dream, with Baza coming to blame him. And I like the fact that Baza was very focused on Alfie. That's Alfie internalizing it. Yes, he's sharing it a bit with Gully. But I think from an external point of view as well, it would have been really nice to have seen Dave Boy, maybe going through his motions, and his guilt around the death of Baza. I mean, we do have that nice moment where he raises a glass of or bottle of single malt as a tribute to Baza. I like as well that Alfie's mum is there at the funeral as well, along with Gully and his team, sort of closing ranks and really coming out to pay tribute to Baza.
I love the words from Alfie's mom. I loved where she was talking about him being wise beyond his years. He was a real gentleman. He always, it was always a pleasure to see Baz around. It's a lovely moment of tribute. And then Dave Boy tries to start whistling Lily of the Lamplight, very well known song for particularly for funerals or particularly for those kind of mournful celebrations, and is told to stop very quickly by Alfie because, hey, we've got Sandra here. She's an actual singer who can do the song justice.
Definitely. But yeah, you don't really get the sense from Dave Boy, and it would have been nice if that was played a bit more. I mean, even, at the funeral, Alfie really kind of, comes on board with helping Gully out on these 2 jobs that come up. And it would have been nice that, the tensions that you see, after that, robbery and hold up, between Dave Boy and Banjo, that maybe there was a bit more, that it was coming from that place rather than it was because they were doing a robbery. And, there was an unease from Alfie that, well, we're not thieves. We do jobs at, it's kidnappings or extractions, that kind of thing. More military, more military kind of feel in a sense. Whereas this is a straight off robbery on the Lord Mayor. And that attack was really, really good. I loved the style of the horse carriage being drawn by a car.
Very cool, yeah.
That ye olde look of the Lord Mayor, but surrounded by, with machine guns and all that. I just thought that was a perfect Pennyworth feel to how the Lord Mayor of London would be riding around the city at this time. So I thought that was very cool. But
lots of violence in here from Alfie's. It's kind of ratcheting it up the tension as he's going to try and get the information out of the Lord Mayor here, where this gold bullion is effectively. It is like a highway robbery. It's like 1800s kind of thing, that the little highwayman. He's going very, very violent here.
Yeah, but he also has that flashback when he places the charge on the door to blow it open, and there's the flashback to the car blowing up and taking out Bazza. And I think that was really good.
Yeah.
Again, I think it would have been good if as well that had happened with Dave Boy. It would have been nice to kind of see them. Yes, they're barely functional in Gully's team. Because effectively once he did that, he was sidelined as they moved on. And then he becomes, as you say, really violent, just kind of get the job done. But I would have really liked to have seen it affect Dave Boy here, and I think really, make them barely functioning. But there's a lot of tension here as a result of Baz's death, really. We see not only between Alfie and Gully, Dave Boy and Banjo, a lot of it's murked with the job rather than Baz's death. But I think ultimately it probably is to do with Baz's death because of that flashback on the attack of the Lord Mayor, but also with Sandra before going on that job, and then effectively Alfie immediately jumping in on Gully's wife, Mrs. Troy, effectively, and giving her a big kiss at Delaney's after Gully and Alfie have kind of, I would say, secured a truce between the two of them rather than made up and are now friends again. Yeah. But it's certainly a lot of tension in this group, and I suspect it's going to go downhill again very quickly.
Yeah, there is some weird stuff with the writing there, but where Alfie is challenging Gully when Gully hits his wife effectively, and he says to Gully, "If you want to hit your wife, hit her at home." Basically, and you hear Mrs. Troy going, "Oh, that's very chivalrous of you." And then later on she goes, "No, I did mean that was very chivalrous of you." And then they kiss. And you're kind of going, no, that wasn't chivalrous at all. He was saying, go home and hit your wife at home because I don't want to see it, basically. I can't control what you do at home kind of thing. But there's a real good bit of tension there with Gully when he's kind of, they're standing up against each other. I suppose, as you say, I wish it was connected with the death of Bazza, the tension, but it's actually played out as Dave Boy, but as Dave Boy and Alfie are working for somebody else now.
Yeah.
Bazza and Dave Boy work for Alfie because they trust Alfie. He's the leader of that group. Now that Bazza's gone, the two of them now have to work for Gully, who they don't really trust. And he's trying to tell them what to do all the time. He's telling them when to get drunk. He's telling them when to celebrate. He's telling them what to do. And neither of them like this. but it's not tied to that connection with Baza. But I love that line from Gully Troy saying, I'm Gulliver Troy and you do not cross me. And Alfie responding with, I'm Alfred Pennyworth and I just did. What are you going to do about it? It's a really good challenge because this is two leaders right here, just butting heads, so you wonder where that's going to go. Him kissing Troy's wife downstairs directly under the balcony where Gulliver Troy is. Probably not the greatest idea of ideas. He will definitely find out in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, she does slap him as well. It's kind of like, don't do that. And maybe that was just in case Gully was watching on, so she could kind of feign the sort of besmirched woman, if you will. But I think as well, until you mentioned it, I hadn't really thought that what Alfie said in terms of you can beat her at home, it doesn't feel like Alfie to me. And again, it's like it would have been better if that was because he is completely out of his own zone because he's under bereavement. And I guess that's what it is, but it just didn't translate well enough for that to be the reason. As you say, it came across more that they were annoyed because they were now having to take orders from Gully, as you say, as that whole conversation between the two of them where they draw knives on one another comes out. It feels more like a professional rivalry and wanting to move on from being in the army back in the day, and as you say, Alfie being his own boss, rather than it being because Alfie is barely functioning when he does this because he's still bereaving the loss of one of his best friends, Baza. So I think that could have come out a lot better, I think, in this episode. Yeah. But I do like the touch points that they did have here with Baza's funeral, with the dream, with some of the flashbacks. And, so that was in the mix, but at times it felt like it had nothing to do with that. Yeah.
I think it's something really in that conversation with Sandra and Alfie after they've slept together, after he wakes up at 3:00 in the morning to go out on that job. Basically, it says, we'll send you home in a car. Sandra has that conversation with her where she says she's looking on and he's getting colder and colder. As time is going on, he's becoming a very cold, dispassionate type of person. And I think that's part of the character that they're building here of Alfie while he's still in London, is that he's getting colder and more dispassionate, or at least trying to hide that side of himself. And it seems to be popping up in his dreams, his blaming himself. He's not having those conversations with people in the real world. He's having them with his father in his dreams. He's having them with Dave Boy and Baza when Baza comes back.
He's got the issues with his mum and not wanting to go to America.
Yeah. But all that stuff is coming out in his subconscious, like it did in season 1 after he lost his fiance. A lot of this stuff is him being very cold, calculating when he's with other people, but below the surface, he's not doing too well.
It's kind of everything that's happened, because even Esme has had a flashback in the death. With the death. Right. So I do feel that it's all just getting on top of him and he's not able to process it. And I think it's all just a cumulative build-up happening here. I feel they could have, with the significance of Baz's death, at least for me, I wish they'd just drawn that out a bit more to kind of say it's just it's the next thing that's just sort of piling on the pressure for Alfie. And at the moment, the only way he sees out is his American dream. Exactly. And I think that is what was kind of being said there. But I think you really have to root for that a bit here.
Yeah. No, I agree. We can kind of roll into the Raven Union parts of this episode. At this point here, I think the connection between the two is Beth is still on the run. She's made it to London. And they do find the Lord Mayor after Alfie and the boys have taken the Lord Mayor out and left him to die on the street. Beth does
nick a fiver.
Exactly, she does find the Lord Mayor, goes through his pockets and steals enough money for a brekkie. Things are looking up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, the Lord Mayor has been there for quite some time, because it was at night time that they did the jump on him. And it's very stand and deliver kind of highwayman type of attack on the Lord Mayor. And then it is Bet finding him the next morning, still kind of groaning. But I love that she just effectively fleeces him. And with Bet, I am so glad that they've made it to London.
Yes.
And I'm really glad that she's found Peggy.
Yeah. A couple of things we need to talk about her arrival in London as well. So, so confirmed here that she did sleep with the driver, female driver, to get the passage down there. And, you know, but they are, it looks like, in the back of a truck full of bodies.
It really does, yeah.
Doesn't it?
It does.
So that's been confirmed now. So we've had kind of allusions to it throughout season 1 that Beth could possibly be bisexual or a lesbian, but we hadn't had her have a relationship with anybody, partly because she's a bit mental. Not that I would say that to her face, but partly because she's a bit crazy, so she hasn't been in any relationships really. But this seems to be the first confirmation. We've seen it throughout the first couple of episodes with her and Katie. She's very possessive of Katie, and she's definitely attracted to her, is what we've said. But there may be more to it than that. There may be more, at least on Beth's side, about what she wants out of Katie in this relationship with her.
Definitely. I actually really liked Beth and Katie here. You know, there was a lot of kind of lines that Beth is, you know, she's still trying to figure out Katie's kind of connection with her, and I think it's that as well that gives there's the sexual tension there from Beth's side towards Katie, where she goes, "Do you trust me?" And Katie's sort of, you know, she can't be too definite because Beth will just, you know, change position with the wind. And, you know, she is that sort of highly strung, unstable person that Frances Gaunt and Salt have said to Lord Harwood. Yeah. And Katie can really feel that. And I like how she kind of wants to, does Katie, but she can't because, first of all, she was arrested by her side. She was interrogated by her, but then these kind of mood swings that happen, towards her that she just she can't predict, Beth at all.
Yeah.
So I kind of really like that.
The reaction from Beth when Katie said that she's a bit mad, you know, it was the stereotypical, "You're calling me a bit mad," about to kill her effectively, and then kind of holds back for a second. But
I do like that Beth called Katie a soft bun, or soft roll. You like a soft bun, when she's gone rifling.
As soft as a bun, yeah.
You're soft as a bun,
right.
After she'd been rifling through the Lord Mayor and stuff. I think that, and I'm really pleased, I'm so pleased Beth and Peggy are back together. Yeah. I really am pleased because I do feel that this story needs to just move on a little. I get they were on the run. I get we had to see that. There's part of me that feels like I want Beth to get in the central part of this story now, really, you know, knee deep, whether that is connecting in with Alfie or somehow trying to get some revenge on Harwood because she thinks that he has attacked her.
Right. Confirmation this episode that it wasn't.
It's certainly not Harwood.
It wasn't Harwood. No,
but she doesn't know that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But we know it was Salt now. That's been properly confirmed. I don't know whether we just missed it in the lines that it was Harwood sent, get the information to Salt to go and pick up, Beth. So that is confirmation that it was him that did it off his own back. So, potentially he's also, not in for a good time in the future. But yeah, great to see Beth and Peggy back together. Really looking forward to seeing them, in the next half of the season, because there's just something about the interplay between the two of those characters. They're set up so well that Peggy is able to handle Beth no matter how crazy she gets.
Exactly.
Which is quite good.
And I think with Salt, I actually think Salt is setting Frances Gaunt up for the wrath of Harwood. So it was Gaunt who said about Beth being unstable, and whilst Salt agreed, you know, he kind of stays in the shadows a bit. And he has set this up, whether Gaunt even did that after Harwood said, "No, we go and get her." And I think maybe Salt's playing from the sidelines or from the shadows here a bit. And we see again in this episode, Salt trying to sow seeds of discontent, or at least for the future. You know, Lord Harwood is being very clear he doesn't want anyone from the Raven Union to go and parlay with the English League. You know, he wants total victory here. But the conversation between Gaunt and Salt in the corridor, where it looks like he's telling Gaunt to go off and parlay, exactly what Harwood doesn't want to do. He's had Beth Sykes attacked, exactly like Lord Harwood didn't want to do. And at the interface of those is Frances Gaunt. You know, And I think it all comes back to Project Stormcloud ultimately.
Absolutely, he wants to deploy this this thing he's worked on for such a long time. His project. He definitely wants to deploy it. Harwood's also losing a bit of his health here as well.
Yeah, we do get to see that. Yeah,
we see him completely explode at everybody, where everybody's telling him what to do, and he's going, "I'm the High Chancellor of England. Nobody tells me what to do." You know, you get that kind of real explosion from Harwood, and then later on, after being given the tablets from Salt to calm him down and to deal with whatever the medical issue is, the unspoken medical issue, we see the conversation between Harwood and Gaunt, where it gets to a point in the conversation, and then he doesn't remember anything he said. So he's starting to effectively lose some of his cognitive ability, let's say.
Definitely. And I'm wondering, is that something to do with Salt as well? You know, we see Salt give him medication.
Yeah.
He's obviously a scientist. He knows his chemicals. Is there something that he's doing here, again, to remove Lord Harwood from his position?
Yeah.
Is that a bigger play from Salt here? So, you know, I love how he's being really shadowy, but ultimately what we get here is with Lord Harwood really wanting this total victory, we get the test of Project Stormcloud,
yes.
Which I think is really nicely done. It kind of was very reminiscent of those scenes where you see tests like this, whether it's the nuclear detonations for testing nuclear weapons, where people are in, a distant, secure location, or like this, you've got the protective glass as they test Project Stormcloud. And of course, deliciously brought in on all of this is Dr. Lucius Fox.
Well, yes, just quickly.
Which is fabulous.
Absolutely, just quickly, definitely, as the smoke filled the screen in front of that glass, how much were you waiting for that hand to come
Absolutely.
on the glass? As
it felt very zombie-esque, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know what it also was making me think? It felt like what they wanted to accomplish with Stormcloud was what the weapon that they had in the Serenity movie, the Firefly Serenity movie, where it was effectively that they drop this gas and everybody just lays down and dies. It feels like that's what they wanted, everybody to be perfectly preserved so they could just kick them out and take the buildings, basically. That's kind of what seemed to be the plan. Stormcloud, while, it doesn't damage any of the property, it still doesn't seem to accomplish exactly what they wanted, not leaving any form of bloody mess afterwards. Like the person that smacks off the window, you can see blood's coming out of them.
Yes.
So maybe it doesn't leave them completely untouched, like they're saying, but at least it leaves the buildings intact. Is kind of
it's quick. Plan. It's certainly quick. So yeah,
they look like they're in pain though.
No, absolutely. I love that whole testing. I mean, you see the shock from Francis Gaunt. You can see Salt being pretty proud of his project and his creation.
Yeah.
I think Lord Harwood this is what I'm looking for. And let's deploy it effectively. And then
let's talk about
we
Lucius
see
then.
Lucius as well, a bit like Francis Gaunt going, what the hell?
Yeah.
So I guess as well he's CIA rather than English League spy.
Yeah.
So I reckon that's where he's coming from, is that, and that will be his connection as well with Thomas Wayne.
Yeah. So comic books, Lucius is a person that works for Wayne Enterprises. I know we've heard a little bit in the episode, we'll talk about it later on a bit, that Thomas Wayne talks about, the lawyers for Wayne Enterprises are the people that find out information for him. He does have kind of a cabal of people working for Wayne Enterprises, or the Wayne Foundation, or just the Waynes, effectively. So whether Lucius is there on behalf of Thomas or whether he's working for the CIA, the other kind of question about the mission that he has here is, does Lucius know what he's going to see here, or is he looking for information? Is he going into this society to try and find out how good or bad they are, effectively? How awful are their plans? And then he seems pretty surprised at what he's actually seeing with this test. So the test that he's now filmed. So I'm wondering whether he's on a mission to find out exactly what Project Stormcloud is, or was he on a mission to find out any plans he possibly could of the Raven Union? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess he would have to have been sort of embedded there for a while to come to Project Stormcloud, which is highly top secret and confidential. So I guess he's been there for a while. Yeah. I guess he may have even been working on aspects of it, maybe not necessarily the chemicals. We don't see that, but possibly deployment techniques.
Yeah. What's he call himself again when he goes in past the security guard? He calls himself second tech support because, you need more than one tech support person on these kind of projects.
So he's doing the computer systems.
Exactly. But really interesting to see him in there. I'm looking forward to seeing more of Lucius and
definitely
and how they're going to handle it. As I say, my big question for Lucius now is, will they keep him apart from Alfred Pennyworth in the Pennyworth TV show?
I guess
so. That he never knows that.
I guess so, but I think it's a really nice introduction for Pennyworth to do, and certainly with the connection of Thomas Wayne. I think here the connection is Thomas Wayne. Yeah. It won't be Pennyworth. I think there will be that distance there, and I guess it will develop around Thomas Wayne and the CIA. But I just think it's something really good that they've done here with the show to bring in Lucius Fox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Will we go out of the English League part of the episode, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose there's a couple of kind of sections that make up the English League in this episode. The new Prime Minister elections, obviously a big section of the episode, or at least some really interesting stuff in here. The three major candidates for the Prime Minister of England under this very small group are Mr. Penhaligon, who's the Cornish Member of Parliament that we talked about earlier on. Yeah. We have John Ripper, who we knew has some plans for the country, and we have Mr. Aziz, or Inspector Aziz, all three of them giving their impassioned speeches to the group of English leaguers that are in the room. So Mr. Penhaligon, we don't really hear much of it. We just feel that he's quite regional focused. He seems to be focused on Cornwall and everywhere west of Tamar, as he calls it. Tamar being a river, and he lives on the other side of that. So he seems very localized, probably not very good to be standing in front of everybody in London and saying to them, this is my focus is on one small area. We then get our speech from John Ripper as to what he wants to do to solve the problem that is the Raven Union. He wants to release all the prisoners, make them fight for the English League versus the Raven Union, sacrifice their lives, and if any of them do live, then they'll get a royal pardon from the Queen, is his plan.
Yeah, he wants the English League effectively to go on the offensive against the Raven Union. There, at the moment, it's really, they're just in a holding pattern. They're not really doing much, and it's therefore practical solutions for action is what he says. And that involves all the criminal elements that are in the prisons. Yeah. Utilize that manpower for violent action to win battles.
Yeah.
And the counterpoint comes in with Aziz then that, he absolutely agrees that there needs to be action, but we have to keep the moral principles that we hold, because that will bring people on board. We can't turn out like the Raven Union, where it's about military, it's about authoritarian. There has to be that distinction in principle between the two. And it seems as though that argument wins the day for Aziz, and he gets elected to that role formerly held by the disgraced Archbishop Potter.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting argument that's coming from John Ripper here. This idea of turning out the prisons and sending them off to kill your enemies. I feel like that's something that's been used in one of the wars. World War I or World War II, or even the Vietnam War. It feels like something. Can you think of anything that it might be a reference to, John? This idea of using prisoners as your infantrymen, effectively.
The only thing I can think of is probably mercenaries. They're hired, swords effectively. Yeah. And it could be along those kind of ideas. Yeah. And I think always the military, certainly in the past, has been, a useful place for respectable killing. So maybe it's already filled with potential murderers and killers. But of course, that's the job to do. I mean, there's always that thing. It's like, it's controlled. You're allowed to do it under very specific circumstances when you go to war. And that, the people that flourish there, they flourish within that situation, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're murderers or killers, but maybe there's that tendency towards direct action, physical, or violence, and that it's channeled in the right way at the right time to get results, and therefore they're integrated into society. So I guess there is a bit of that. I think mercenaries are that, thugs for hire, effectively.
Yeah, true.
So I think it's around the mercenary stuff.
Yeah. And I think this part of it, this argument does come around a lot. Why would they be living off the state in our prisons when we can actually put them to use effectively, is the kind of attitude of it. It did also, because we're in the Batverse here in this story, it did also kind of remind me of, letting the lunatics out of Arkham Asylum to go crazy on the city.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like a little bit. Is I'm not really too sure whether you want to take every violent prisoner that you've actually captured and put away in a prison for rehabilitation and unleash them on the world. Like, how do you rein them back in afterwards? Kind of feels that kind of crazy idea. But yes, Aziz becomes the leader. Another little weird thing about this episode for me is just because we'd spent so much time at this presentation, I suppose, of these three leaders, that it's such an offhand comment later on when they say Inspector Aziz is now the PM. We don't get an acceptance speech from Inspector Aziz. We don't get a moment where it cuts back to the English League and they say, they have the kind of awarding of him being PM. It's just a line that's said in the Raven Union where they're saying, Aziz is now the leader, and his duplicity from season 1 now comes back a little bit, where they're saying he could be tempted to make a deal and make an arrangement with us to effectively give us control of London. It's not even to say that that the English League would still keep what they're going for. They're saying that Aziz is the type of person you could persuade with a good conversation with him.
Well, that's it. I think you really get the sense that Francis Gaunt is saying that he's a man that they can work with.
Yeah.
But with Lord, the sticking point is that Lord Harwood was arrested by Aziz and really doesn't feel in the mood or have that generosity to really open up that channel with Aziz. His position, I think, now is absolutely, we've wasted enough time. We've lingered too long on the outskirts of London, Manchester, Liverpool, Cornwall. We need to take action and win the war.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where it's going to clash with Francis Gaunt's approach. And the person behind there pulling all the strings is Salt, to cause that discontent in high command of the Raven Union.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was a little confused about Harwood saying about, it was Aziz that arrested him and put him in the tower. And then I remembered that was early in season 1. That was about episode 3, I think, or 3 or 4 of the season. I thought he meant at the end of the season. He's talking to Francis Gaunt going, Inspector Aziz arrested me and put me in the tower. And I was going, but she was right beside you in the tower. She was in a cell right beside you. It wasn't that one. It was earlier on in the season when Aziz arrested him and interrogated him.
Yeah, but also it resulted in Harwood losing his nose as well.
True. Very true. So I can understand why he would be pretty angry with Aziz. But again, we'll have to wait till the next half of the season to see what's going on and what's going to happen with Aziz. Will he take the duplicitous route of any way out of this war, or will he stand up with the English League and go for the win, whatever is necessary, kind of way. So he's saying in his speech that we don't have to become as bad as them. We can keep our morals and win the war effectively. And even if we die in that war, somebody else will come up and take our place, is what he's kind of saying. So an interesting idea for what's going to come up in the next half of the season. Because Martha is a member of the English League, we are going to talk about Martha and Thomas and his sister Patricia's story from the episode. Does that work okay for you, John? Happy enough with that?
Yeah, I think that works. They're connected. I mean, certainly Martha is, and I guess maybe if Thomas is putting Lucius Fox into as a spy into the Raven Union, then I think despite maybe his chain of command telling him that he really has to be on the side of the Raven Union, maybe he's just subverting that a little. Okay, we haven't seen this, we don't know this for sure, but that kind of feels as though it could make sense that Thomas Wayne is, he's still gathering intel against the Raven Union as much as being involved in trying to undermine the English League. I think with Martha, absolutely, I really like this. I think they ultimately do get back together to some extent, or at least they're on talking terms again after what happens after this episode. But I like that Martha was really standing her ground. I'm hoping that the get together is just because they seem to have had quite a bit to drink. At least I think Martha has. And that there's still a bit of frostiness between the two of them. I don't want them to just suddenly come back so quickly, because I do think, what Thomas has done in getting Crowley to kill, or at least to discredit Potter, and it led to his suicide. I think Martha has taken that quite badly, and she feels very strongly. But I do like here that
nobody wanted Potter dead. Remember, John, he's very clear about that.
No, I know that, but consequence of actions is what Martha is saying. You can't just actually abdicate responsibility for it, because that was your intention, was to discredit him. You didn't know how that would then play out.
But he does feel bad. Thomas does feel bad about this.
No,
I think we may get to the point that Thomas steps away from his job in the CIA because of the kind of things that have happened by the missions he's had to do for them. It is his job.
I guess so. I guess he'll realize he's more principled than a spy should be. But I like that Martha is still saying, well, I was invited to Patricia's party anyway, so I'm going. Because Thomas is trying to get Martha to go with him, and she's like, well, I'll be there anyway, because I was invited. The only Wayne I will be trusting is Patricia. And I really liked that. I liked keeping that tension. And I get why they've come together at the end, because there's Jacques Duval, who Patricia has latched onto. There's a great moment in the party where Martha is saying, well, Patricia's got enough now. She's not going to go too deep in with Jacques Duval. He seems like a bit of a player, a bit of a bon vivant, that, it is playing with her here. And then
it's like, she'll get over it in 2 weeks.
And then Jacques gets down on his knee and proposes to her, and she's like, yes. I love that. I just like the contrast. That was really good.
Absolutely. I have it in the notes as Jacques Duval, the dressmaker, is Patricia Wayne's new fiancé for a moment. Because you can kind of tell this is not going to go well. This is not going to be a relationship. You see the way he talks to Martha the whole time from when she's there in front of him. He's looking at her as, you're in my next project once I move on from Patricia, basically, But we do hear that this is something that he does do very often. Jacques Duval is another person from Gotham. He's from Gotham City and was driven out of Gotham City for sleeping with the very young heiress to the Elliot family fortune. So it seems like he was trying to get in with another member of the upper echelon, the 1% of Gotham, the Wayne family, by meeting up with Patricia. So interestingly, it is another person from Gotham. So 3 people from Gotham living in London, in the 60s. Interesting. It was quite a vibrant place, back then in the 60s in the real world. Anyway, a lot of people wanted to travel there, especially the party set would go to London for party times.
The social scene.
But I'm not sure
events.
While a war is going on, whether it would have the same attraction as it did in the real world, while it's under lockdown from,
well, Martha's always been there, and it would seem as though, Thomas, Lucius are on a job.
Lucius also from Gotham.
And then I guess with Patricia, she was going around Europe anyway beforehand, so she's still in that neck of the woods. Jacques, don't know, but London European fashion scene, maybe, if he is a fashionista,
he is
doing all that kind of stuff.
He seems to know how a good birthday suit.
I mean, I really like the party here as well. Another great scene that they put together. I think, I really would want the producers of Pennyworth to sort of create a party and decorate and all that kind of stuff. They really know how to do that well.
They always look like fun, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think here as well that's important is we do find out from Thomas that he's no longer engaged to Betsy.
Yes, we do.
So that could be another thing. And
you had a question over that. I said that when the line was said by Patricia that he's no longer together with her. I was kind of going, oh, okay, they broke up. And we haven't even seen her. We haven't heard any phone calls or anything about her. And you kind of questioned that instantly, saying, was this just something that Thomas said to create a separation between himself and Martha when he arrived back on the CIA? Or did he call her up after they met again, saying, "Oh, she's interested. I'm going to cancel this engagement with Betsy."
Exactly. Who knows? It may play out a bit more, but we do see, Thomas seducing Martha because Jacques Duval wants to turn Martha into a butterfly, but that involves in him trying to seduce her by getting naked once she's in like a really gorgeous dress, actually.
Yeah.
But little does he know who he's dealing with. I love the fact that Patricia and Thomas come back and Duval is hogtied there in the middle of the floor, and we get this seduction of Martha, or between the two of them, between Thomas and Martha. And there is a nice little phrase. Martha says, "I've never been seduced by a crypto-fascist B word before," and I thought that was really, really good. But I wonder if it's going to be full on. I hope not. I hope it's still a little bit more distant so that they can build that trust up again that was lost. But we'll see.
We do know a spoiler from this season, and we do know it's not really a spoiler, obviously. We do know that they are the parents of Bruce, so we know they get together eventually.
No, I know that. But I mean, I'm just saying that if they've taken the time, say, with Bet to get to London and to Peggy, which they could have done sooner, I hope that the reverse doesn't. I think a couple of episodes is all I'm saying. For me, it's that idea of making it feel right in the audience's mind, rather than it's like, click of the fingers and they're back together as though what Thomas didn't do hadn't affected Martha. I know it's not, this isn't a real life drama, but I think, as an audience, you do want to get some sense of, despite all the craziness and weirdness and different time periods, different technologies, you want to believe that people operate consistently, even if it's that Bet as a crazy lady is operating normally for a crazy lady in your own mind, however that might play out. So that's all. It's more that. I mean, of course they're going to get back together. I hope they do. I want to see it done in the right way because it's such an important relationship for what goes forward with, obviously, old Brucey.
I think in a show like this, I'm really glad they took the time to do this kind of side story with Patricia in this episode. It's not a necessary story by any means, but it's necessary, as you say, to the characters of Thomas and Martha to have them rekindle their relationship because they've been so separated the first 4 episodes here as well. So it is important to have them rekindle because they have felt so separated. Like the last couple of episodes have been kind of going, how are these two going to ever reconcile? Considering we know that they are this power couple in Gotham in the future. We know they get together eventually, but that has to happen at some point, and they have to be as a couple at some point for a while. So hopefully now they'll have a bit more time together. But I do, I do take your point. I don't think Martha's the kind of person who will lie down and just take whatever it is that Thomas is doing. She will be very feisty with him, regardless of how long this part of the relationship lasts. There will still be some battles between the two of them as they go on, but nice to see them together because it does feel like that was cruelly ripped away at the end of last season by the gunshot that took Thomas out and sent him back to Gotham. So nice to have a little rekindling here of their relationship. So I've just got a few notes about the episode. Just one that I slightly mentioned there about this character of Jacques Duval getting chased out of Gotham because he slept with a 13-year-old heiress to the Elliot family. The Elliot family are a very important family in comic books. Thomas Elliot is one of Bruce's closest friends when he was a child. And in the TV show Gotham, Tommy Elliot was a bully of Bruce Wayne's until Bruce had enough and finally punched him, which is his first time he'd ever really acted out under the tutelage of Alfred Pennyworth. But in the comics, the Elliot family and the Wayne family are seen as contemporaries. They're seen as friends. And as I say, Bruce and Tommy did hang out quite a lot. So kind of interesting that Duval has a connection with that family. That's why he was kicked out of Gotham. I just thought that was a nice little touch in there. And one of the one that I thought was interesting, the Cornish PM candidate, who I just can't stop talking about, obviously, for some reason. He's called Mr. Penhaligon in the show, possibly a reference to a Liberal MP, David Charles Penhaligon, who became a popular MP. He was born in 1940 and would have been an active MP in a junior ministerial sense, so in the junior Liberal party back in the early 60s. Very, very popular. So would have been around at this kind of time period, if we're right in Pennyworth being around 66, 67 kind of time. He would have been around at the right time, became popular MP, but was passed over at first. Apparently, this is the wording from Wikipedia, apparently because of his strong Cornish accent was thought unattractive to the people who made decisions within the party. So I like that they've effectively translated that into him speaking Cornish at a London assembly to elect the next prime minister, and they've all kind of looked at him going, yeah, maybe not you. And so that I like the reference that they did again take someone from the real world and put them in here. Sadly, David Penhallogan, the actual Liberal MP, died in a car crash in the 80s, but he was tipped as being a leader of the Liberal parties in the UK, as he'd developed a really positive career and done some really good work in the UK. So just thought it was interesting that they're making that reference.
Yeah, I think from my side, it's just, I mentioned it in the synopsis, but we have Peggy, who is the owner of a new establishment called Sykes Payne for sex aids and books. Obviously building on her penchant for this from season 1 with her house staff.
Your two favourite characters, John.
Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Spicer, who were both dressed up as gimps, were footstools, coffee tables, whipped up a nice scrambled egg, literally for breakfast with a whip. So it'd be interesting to see what dark and dangerous stuff lies within Peggy Sykes' new establishment, for sure. But I thought that was bang on point for Peggy. Excellent. So great to see her thriving through her sex aids and books during the time of war.
Absolutely. Somebody has to do it. Huh?
Exactly.
One that I wanted to just point out from quotes for the episode, you kind of mentioned it earlier on, just to take the line there. Beth says that the Lord Mayor is going to get a good scragging when she sees him. Scragging is a term for beating up or handling roughly, I think, is the direct translation of the term. But just thought we'd point those out because I know there's a lot of you hear some of the Britishisms and find them difficult to translate.
Yeah.
And I'll admit we're probably the same a lot of the time. Some of the accents that are used, some of the wording that's used in the episode are words that we don't hear very often either. So if you do see any other ones, John, do you have any other ones?
Yeah, well, John Ripper does mention to spilling some claret.
Oh, yeah.
Which is blood rather than actual an expensive wine. Yep. So
it's a red wine, though.
Yes, it is a red wine. So yeah, he talks about needing the English League to spill some claret and to unleash these criminal hordes. So yeah, that's about dropping a lot of blood from putting these criminals into action.
Excellent. I think that's it for our discussion about the episode. John, how would you rate this episode of Pennyworth?
It's a toughie for me, I think. I really did like this episode. I kind of just feel that there's some aspects here, such as with Martha and Thomas, that I hope they kind of just get right moving forward. And I think with Alfred, with the fallout from Bazza, and this is just my own personal preference, I would have liked to have seen these issues happening in this episode being more to do with Bazza than everything getting pent up, and some kind of discussion outside of the vision to really understand Alfred. So I would give this 3.5 Sykes Payne supplies out of 5 for me. Okay. But I think it was probably more towards a 4.
Okay.
But I think I just need a little bit more reassuring, and that won't be till March now. So 3.5 to 4.
Right. Okay. 3.75. Let's cut it there.
Let's put it there. Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you. I think it's a really good episode, though.
Yeah, I do.
And I think it's a shame that this is our cliffhanger for the next couple of months. Totally understandable, though. Pennyworth is now on this break until next year. This is on a forced break, because filming had to stop in the UK.
Yeah, with COVID.
With all the lockdowns, it was very difficult to get back to work for filming for these shows. There was a conversation that I saw with Jack Bannon, and myself and John have talked about this off air, John. I don't think we've mentioned it on the podcast, though. But there was an interview with Jack Bannon where he kind of said they had to retool the show a bit as well, because of all these, the filming restrictions where, everybody has to obviously be completely, clear of COVID before they can film together. So he did say that a lot of bigger action sequences where it was one-on-one fighting have been changed to a bit more dialogue heavy. So that's probably a good thing in this show, that it's not always action. There is a lot of dialogue. Alfie being the kind of person he is, he can kind of talk himself in and out of a lot of situations. So it'll be interesting to see how it actually pans out when the show comes back, in March. But it did have to go on a break. It's very good of them to actually have the episodes out.
Yeah, definitely.
At this time, at least give us some Pennyworth, because it was almost, a year and a half, I think, since the last season, or a year at least since the last season finished before the season started. So we've had quite a long time without Pennyworth in our lives. So we can put up with a couple more months, can't we?
Exactly. I think it's great that they've put out these first 4, and, they just have to go on this, enforced break, in order to bring the other final, group of episodes, to the screen in their final, form.
Yeah.
I think, I do like this episode a lot, 3.75. It is a very good recommend, from me, for sure. I suppose there's just a few things that are kind of creeping in, that I'd like resolved. I think Martha and Thomas in a satisfactory way. I think now that Beth is with Peggy, I expect it to speed up and her to be more involved, but I'm hoping she's not kept on the periphery, for any more time. And I think that, I think the main thing that's been possibly lost in this is just the fallout from Baza.
Yeah,
but what we did have was good, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah. So,
I feel like that, given the season is short as it is with 10 episodes within a season, I doubt they would have done any kind of massive break like this had the circumstances been different in the UK where they're filming. If it was filming in the US, they probably wouldn't have been back to work now. There's been calls for all filming to stop completely in the US. So at least we've had the filming completed, I think, in October. So that's been done, but obviously there's so much else that goes into a TV show. So taking this break is definitely the right thing to do. But I think you'd probably, from a story perspective, breaking it into 2 halves, potentially one more episode, to kind of get us with a much bigger cliffhanger going into the rest of the season.
I guess that, given they didn't know COVID was going to happen, it would have finished on Baza dying.
Maybe, yeah.
Kind of thing, really. Yeah. That's where, I guess, if you're wanting to do a really big shock, that's where you would have done it. Or the big shock would have been, if it was another episode, would have been, the deployment of Project Stormcloud or something like that.
Yeah. But it would make it even weirder to have it at the death of Baza, since that was on episode 3, and this was part of the 2-part mid-season finale, doing episode 3 and 4 back to back. So not only did they not give us that as the cliffhanger, they didn't even give us a week cliffhanger, where they had a 1 week and then the episode 4 the following week. Again, still quite shocked about the loss of Baza from the show. I would love to have seen him stay on, and I know, John, you miss him in this episode as well. But nice that we at least had a bit of him at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, definitely.
So we got a little bit of feedback in between episodes from Angie Arhus. Angie says, R.I.P. Baza. This episode was very grim indeed. Between the unexpected death of Baza and the suicide of the Archbishop. I agree with you guys. Baza's death seems a waste of a very good character. I'll be very upset if his death was just the result of a petty theft and it doesn't at least tie back into another major storyline. But I really would have liked him to continue on. And to be honest, Dave Boy should be the dead one. He really is kind of a gross character. Thanks for the feedback, Angie. Dave Boy, I suppose it's one of those weird things, isn't it? He's kind of the manly, quiet type, who just drinks, all the time. And as we mentioned in this episode, we don't really see the fallout of the death of his best friend. We just see him drinking more, which is kind of Dave Boy's, go-to thing, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Angie. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think, Dave Boy seems to have gotten off lightly here, for sure. And you just kind of wonder how it will play out. It all seems on Alfie, as we've said, in the podcast. Yeah. But, I agree. I think it still holds for me. I would love to see, Baza back even as this vision for Alfie for the rest of the season. I think that would be on point for Alfie, who has these dreams, visions, memories, spectres that visit him. To really sort of highlight that troubled sense. I think, Dave Boy, I would have loved to have seen his character sort of just have not melt down, but have some kind of remorse for the fact that it was his loose tongue that effectively sank Bazza. And I think that would have been a nice playoff between both Alfie and Dave Boy, feeling guilt for different reasons, and seeing them work through that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I suppose to remember is that Dave Boy's been shot, 4 times and still hasn't died. So I wonder, will we ever get an explanation as to how he survived other than just luck? They are in the world of DC Comics. They can have an in-universe explanation for him having some form of superpower. But yes, really sad to see Bazza go. And thanks once again, Angie, for your feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Angie, for the episode 3 feedback. Really good. Thank you.
That's it for Pennyworth podcast for the first half of season 2 of Pennyworth. We will be back in March, as we mentioned. We may get something else out in advance on the Pennyworth podcast feed. Perhaps there's some new trailer might come out, or we might get something else to talk about before Pennyworth comes out in March. But it's not that long away. And if you do want to keep up with the things we are doing other than Pennyworth, you can follow us on tvpodcastindustries.com. Subscribe to the podcast there, or find us or any good or evil podcast catcher. Just search TV Podcast Industries.
Yeah, you can support us in any way you wish through subscribing, rating us, leaving a review, sending in feedback on our episodes, or supporting us over on our Patreon at patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. We have at the moment Wonder Woman that was released over the Christmas that is also on offer if you have managed to check that out on HBO Max. And of course, yes, we will, as Derek has said, be back later in 2021. Around March sometimes, as we know so far, for the final 6 episodes of Pennyworth.
Yeah. Feels weird to take a break after 4 episodes.
It does. It's really weird.
Nothing we can do about it there. And as I mentioned before, we will be back with WandaVision on Disney Plus from January 15th. At the moment, myself and John are talking about the Disney Plus Marvel Comics documentary, Marvel 616. You'll get those on the main feed on tvpodcastindustries.com. Wanted to do some Marvel Comics coverage before we get back into Marvel TV in 2021. But you'll get them over on our main feed on tvpodcastindustries.com, or we're releasing them a little bit early over on our Patreon at patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries. Thanks so much once again for joining us. We'll talk to you again in 2021.
Yeah, thank you so much, fellow governors, for joining us for this mid-season finale of Pennyworth. It's great discussing these shows with you. As we say, west of the Tamar, keep watching, keep listening. Yarp.
Aren't we east of the Tamar, John?
We are. No, actually, we are west.
We are west, okay.
We are west of the Tamar.
Excellent.
Just west with also a huge body of water called the Irish Sea between us and a different country.
That is true. Yeah. That is true. Talk to you again soon. Bye.
Yarp. Bye.